Obviously, every offseason is exciting and different. This year, there's this whole lead up to the draft with, another 3 pick and the quarterbacks looming out there. Was it even more, spicy or exciting or interesting for you and you guys?
No, I wouldn't say it's more spicy. When you look at the draft process, we want to attack it by one, we had our quarterback process, but we also have to look at what's the best player available. And we're happy that we landed with Abdul. We had 2 years of watching great tape with him, seeing him play off the ball, but also as a rusher, and then getting together with Shane and Dave and figuring out how can he be multiple in our defense and help our rush, because that was a big emphasis: rush, coverage, versatility, creating turnovers. So he helped solve that.
You've talked about that in the past. The idea of making sure the scouting staff, personnel staff, and the coaching staff are all on the same page. So if you're considering drafting a player, what will they do with that player?
Correct.
How important was it with Abdul, because he possesses such a diverse game that you want to see how he's going to be used in your system?
Yeah, good question, Art. So when you look at Abdul's versatility, you know that he can affect the quarterback from multiple positions. And that was the biggest thing. When you have Burns, KT, Abdul, how can you get, our best players in our front 7 aligned and on the field as much as possible to help affect the quarterback? And I think, when you look at his early tape at Penn State, you can see him playing from stacked alignment. When you have a premium athlete like Abdul, he can rush from a stacked linebacker position, or he can rush, over a guard, or same thing with Burns, gives you the versatility to flip-flop, and with KT to create the best matchups on a week-to-week basis. So the ability to be multiple was, really advantageous for us in terms of evaluating Abdul and actually seeing true application of it. It's not a hypothetical projection. We've seen it.
You mentioned the quarterback process. I was just wondering, what's your contributions to that process? How do you look at it? Like, what was your part in that?
Yeah, Jordan, I'd say it was a comprehensive and arduous process where you kind of look at the coaching staff and the scouts. We're on it on 2 different timelines. When you look at the quarterbacks, from the scouting perspective, we have 2 years of a book of business of seeing these guys live, where the coaches get to the offseason, they're playing catch-up for us. And then we have the touch points of the all-star games, as well as the private workouts, the 30 visits, combine. And then when you have the process, the culmination as you kind of build this funnel, as you get later in the spring, you get to watch tape together, figure out what best fits, what are the non-negotiables, and understand, what's going to play at a premium in the system and what can be emphasized based on Dave's vision. So the collaborative process, like I said, it's long. This is our, second year in a row doing a deep dive into it, and we're happy that Jackson's our guy and the way that we came away with it.
At what point did you process with Jackson? At what point did you kind of say that guy could work for us?
Yeah, I think when you look at these players, I say they are their walking resume. So every benchmark matters and contributes to how they would fit for us. So obviously you have your 2 years of tape with Jackson, and then you get to the Senior Bowl. We're lucky enough to have coaches that were involved in coaching there. But the cool part is when we got to Senior Bowl, we get to sit down with other players and you talk to them about, hey, if you have one guy you want to bring to the NFL with you, Jackson was a common theme that came about. And it was players from different sides of the ball. So different sides of the ball, demographics. He's got kind of that everyman feel, which was really unique. And when you get through the spring process and we do our aptitude testing, and as well as a private workout, private dinners, he was a guy who checked all the boxes for us, and we're happy we were able to get him.
Those were conversations with Ole Miss players or guys just showing up in Mobile?
Guys at Mobile, guys who played against him during the regular season, guys that were on the same team with him at Mobile but not at Ole Miss. And then when we get to your private workout, when you have all your skill guys show up for you at a private workout, it shows how they think about you as a teammate. When you go to the pro day and he's cheering on Walter Nolan on the bench press, and he's there early when he's not even doing the lifting portion of the workout, the guys see what kind of equity he builds up with them, and he's got that moxie where guys like to be around him. They gravitate towards him, and they see that he puts the work in. So it was a glove fit for us.
Brandon, every year at the draft, you hear somebody say, like, I thought this team told me they were going to draft me and they didn't draft me. How difficult is the fine line to walk between showing a player love, telling him you're interested in him, and not leading him on to believe he's your guy that you're going to pick?
For sure. And when you get to the combine or early in the process, you're still in the fact-finding part, right? You have a good feel, or you should have a good feel for what the player is on the field, how he could fit into your system from just a skill set standpoint. But then as you have these, call it off-season benchmarks, you figure out the intangibles. And you're negligent if you make that decision on a player before you go through the full kitchen sink process with them. So it's, how can he process? What's the work ethic that he puts in? What are his outside of football interests? What drives him? What's his support system like? All those things contribute to really what's his floor, what's his ceiling. Like when you look at the end of the day, we're looking at the draft, there's a lot of risk analysis that goes on. And then you factor in the medical component. So you find some of that medical component stuff later on, which allows you to either creates you an opportunity for a player or it makes it more risky than not to take the player.
You were talking about risk analysis. What was the calculation with Jackson? Like you're sitting at 3, you know you can get him at 3, and then obviously you take Abdul because everything you said he does, and just not knowing if Jackson's going to make it to wherever you ended up getting him.
Yeah, well, I think when you take Abdul, man, he was, for us, the talent was a no-brainer. You look at opportunity costs, right? What are you giving up potentially for the player you're taking? And we, with the help from NASA, which is our analytics crew that we affectionately call them NASA, and you take our area scouts who they hear the word on the street. Scouts talk, and you hear from other buildings where guys may be on the board, and there's so much dead time in the spring before the draft, you start to hear where guys potentially may fall. And as we get all this information from agents, all third-party sources, we figure, okay, what's our best opportunity to strike? And we knew, once we got into the 20s, there was going to be an opportunity for Jackson. It was going to be at what striking point, and then what would be the compensation we'd have to give up.
Brandon, you know how.
Go ahead, Art.
You and Joe have worked closely together now to this point. So in that point, you're in the draft room. We got to see it after the fact when the team released the video of Joe and just could see the, I don't know how I would describe it, but the emotions of when do we pull the trigger, when do we know it's the right opportunity, and then the relief when it finally hits. From someone who was in there but also just kind of had to watch it transpire, what did that feel like to know that here's a quarterback, and we know how important they are, that you guys like, but you just don't know until you know when you pull that trigger?
Yeah. The first thing, Art, I have to give my hats off for Joe for how systematic and streamlined our processes was, where nothing happened that we were surprised about. Leading up to the draft, we have these strategy sessions where we go through hypothetical scenarios. If we take a player early, if we trade back into one, what does that look like? And it's almost like no different than practicing. You take those reps, so when game day comes on draft day, you're ready for whatever. There's no curveball surprise where you're caught flat-footed. So I think when you get into the 20s, we knew there's going to be striking opportunities and potential deals that could have been done with multiple clubs. And we were happy that we were able to keep pick 65 and get Darius Alexander later. And these are some of those scenarios we worked through. So just for it to come to fruition, seeing that sigh of relief from Joe, everything that we planned for doesn't always go according to plan, but this one planned out the way that we did, said, hey, we may be in this position, what does it look like? And for the way that it came together, we were really happy.
Randy,